Alex Riviere. I'm a senior developer at Hygiena. We make cool software, and I appreciate them letting me come and speak here, and thank you for having me here. So today we're going to talk about hot new CSS features. Yay! We all love hot new, and fresh, and hot CSS features. This is super great. Here's the QR code to these slides. You are going to want this QR code, and you're going to want the link to these slides. Trust me on that. So go ahead and take a picture. I'm going to give you a second. Now, before we get started, I'm going to do, this is the interactive portion of the talk. I'm going to do a very quick vibe check. So, show of hands, how many people have ever used Display Flex? Excellent, because I'm not covering that in this talk. All right, who here has used Display Grid? Brilliant. We will fly through that section. Who here has used var -- custom property? Cool, we can also fly through that section. Who here has used @container? 3 hands, okay. Good, this is good. That means y'all are gonna learn something. Who here has used @layer? 2 hands, okay. Who here has used has? More hands? This is amazing. Okay, good. That's fantastic. All right. So, in the last 6 years or so, there have been 530 features added to CSS. In the last 2 years alone, 250 of them have been added. That's a lot. So, we're going to be here until next Wednesday. So buckle up. No. But that's why I said, seriously, you're going to want the QR code to this, because I'm not going to make you an expert in anything. I'm going to give you resources so that you can become an expert in things, and I'm going to tell you about things that you need to know exist. Now, the question a lot of people have is, why are there suddenly so many improvements in CSS? There's a multitude of reasons, but one of the main reasons is a program that was set up by browser vendors in 2021 called Compat 2021, where basically they all got together and they said, you know what, we should really work on making the browsers more consistent about how they do things. And they devised a list of things where they were like, all the browsers by the end of the year should do these things the same, right? So that it is a consistent experience for developers. That went so well that they did it again, but they changed the name. So the new program is called Interop. So we have Interop 2022, 2023, and 2024. They have just released the list of things they are going to be working on for Interop 2025. So you should absolutely go read up on that and get excited about those things. If we have time, we might cover one of them that I'm still angry at Mozilla about. So in this talk, here are the things that we're going to cover. We're going to fly through custom properties. We're going to fly through CSS Grid. Y'all know what those are, because I saw all your hands. Everybody's hand pretty much went up. There were like maybe 3 hands that didn't. Turn to the person next to you, say hi, and then ask about it. That's all you need to do. We're going to go over nesting, which we can go through that pretty quickly, because I feel like you are all intelligent people, and you will understand what it is that I'm talking about when I say that. We're going to talk about logical properties. Woo! Who does internationalization here? Well, y'all are going to love this. Okay. We're going to talk about has, which a lot of you have used. That's a fantastic number of hands for this feature, because it's so new to be able to be used that quickly. We're going to talk about container queries. We're going to talk about layers, which are super handy and useful, sometimes. So we're going to start with custom properties for the 3 of you who have not used custom properties. It's CSS variables. That's what it's called. Maybe you didn't know it was called CSS custom properties. That's fine. So originally when we were doing custom properties, you would have to, or when you wanted to define a value, you would then go in and hard code it everywhere, right? This is back in the day. And then people were like, I am tired of having to do search and replace for this frickin' color value. So we created CSS preprocessors, which allowed us to, at build time, create a CSS file that would use variables. But all of this happened at build time, and ultimately it would result in a CSS file that looked vaguely like our original thing. So the people who have been building preprocessors are now part of the standards bodies, and they're like, what if we put this in the browser? So they did. And that's what custom properties are. Custom properties are the ability to basically go, hey, I'm going to make a property that is custom by putting dash dash in front of it. That means that it is in a custom it is in the custom user space. And then it will cascade through the entire document, and you'll be able to use it, or through the document from wherever it is that you define it. So if we define it on the root, it's through the whole document. If you were to define it on like a specific A tag, it would only do it inside of that A tag. Very handy, very useful. Good news, it's supported by everything. You can just go use this. This is in browsers. If you're not doing this, why? So go do, or if you're supporting internet, who here is supporting Internet Explorer still? Good. Yeah. The last couple of conferences that I've given this talk at, I still get 1 or 2 hands. And I'm just like, why? You make my life difficult. Okay, so good support, very well supported. These have been around for years at this point, so you can just use them. If you want more information, you can go to MDN. We can also go to CSS Tricks. Now, I've got to condense this down to 30 minutes. Do we want a very fast detour through a bonus round? Cool. I heard a yes, so we're doing it. All right, so let's talk about @property. Who here has used @property? 3 hands, okay. So @property, did you know that CSS is a type-safe language? Let's start there. Yeah, okay, CSS is a type-safe. If you put a pixel value in a color thing, it goes no, right? It doesn't try to render a 1 pixel color. That doesn't work. It's a type-safe language. @property is a way to create custom properties that are type safe. So for instance, we can make @property dash dash my color with syntax color, and this will now only accept colors. So this is really good for if you're trying to do animations and you want to have a custom property that you animate. This is how you do it. You can then, the browser is then able to figure out like, oh, this is going to be a color. I need to be able to animate between 2 colors, right? And it will then function accordingly. You also can turn on whether or not it cascades by turning inherits to either true or false. So by default, all custom properties will cascade through the cascade. So if you define it on the root, it will then, that value will cascade. If you then change the value of it somewhere, it will cascade from that point with the new value. With inherits equals false, and I'll show you this really terrible, I will show you this really terrible demo that I wrote. It won't do that. So basically, this container here has my uninherited color, which is default of, which is default of green, which is these bad boys here. It's using my uninherited color as the border color, and we have set it to black there. And because it is not inheriting, the H2 inside does not get that color. It only applies to the container element. This is a really contrived example because I don't have a good example of where you use it, but basically this is the equivalent of being able to be like, I have a private value that only works to the value that I put it in this thing that I've assigned it to. It's very handy when you need it. Nope. Not there yet. Support, relatively good support. Firefox now supports it as of version 124, and we're well past that at this point, I think. So we good support. This happened last year, so we're good. If you want more information, MDN, Una has a really great article as well. Fantastic. All right, so moving right along. CSS Grid, we're gonna blow through this, because everybody raise their hand. So CSS Grid, we've all done a layout that looks like this. You have a header, you have a footer, you have a sidebar, you have a content, right? When we were doing this before, we would do something like this, like bootstrap, right? And the bootstrap for this, it looks awful. Look at this, there's a header, and then there's a, like, there's a header, and there's a container, and then there's a row, and then you can put the nav and the main, and then right, like we're doing all of this stuff, right? When we do grid, this becomes a lot easier. This is the same layout, right, as the previous one, but the HTML, very complicated. It's a lot simpler to deal with because we're able to say, hey, put this thing here, put this thing here. This example specifically uses grid template areas. So I've defined a header area, I've defined an aside area, a main area, and a footer area. So our columns are 25% and 1 FR. FR is a fractional unit that says take up this much space. So if I have a 1 FR unit and a 1 FR unit, they'll figure out the math for what that needs to be. Then for our rows, we have a 40 pixel row, a 1 FR row, and a 40 pixel row. And then we just assign grid areas to everything, and then they go into the place that they're supposed to. Yay, magic. Grid is amazing. You should be using it if you are not, because it is well supported. Complicated examples of this are bar charts. You make a grid that is 100 rows tall, and then you just say what percentage something is, and now suddenly you have a bar chart. Similarly, you can do really complex postmodern art. My favorite part about this is showing the actual HTML for it, because the actual HTML is just a bunch of LIs. So it's not anything like you're not doing any complicated like nesting stuff. You just put things places. Also, we can no longer make the joke that you can't center a div. You can in 2 lines. Display grid, place content center, done, center to div. So don't let anybody be a bully to you about that anymore. Support, this has been supported actually, for those of you who are not here that use Internet Explorer, parts of this work in Internet Explorer. You're welcome. It's been supported for like 6 years at this point. Y'all, if you're not using Grid, please use Grid. If you want more information, we have MDN, CSS Tricks, Grid by Example, which is like Flexbox Froggy for those of you who ever played that one, if you want to get better at using Grid. We also have layout breakouts, which is a way of using Grid to go, cool, I have content, and then a thing just pops out suddenly, and then I have more content. And you can do all of that with a layout grid where you just go, okay, cool. This one goes in the big space, this one goes in the default space, and it just sizes itself accordingly. It's super fun. I do it on my blog. It's really great. All right, moving right along. Nesting. Who here uses Sass because you can nest your CSS? Yeah, a few hands. Guess what? You don't need to do that anymore. We have, in CSS before we would have to do stuff like this where you'd be like .wrapper, .title, right? To be able to do the title inside the wrapper, and then content inside the wrapper, and then actions inside the wrapper, right? So much writing. Wouldn't it be nicer if we could do this? Well, you can. This is now CSS. This is no longer Sass. This is CSS. This works in a browser. Yay! Love it. It's fantastic. All right. And it has relatively decent support. I have started using this, but I'm also building a thing that not very many people use, and I can say, no, don't use that browser. So we're good. If you want more information, we have MDN, and you have Jen Simmons wrote a really great thing over on the WebKit blog when it first came out. There are some weird differences between Sass and how it works in the browser. So you cannot just change your Sass file to be a CSS file now. Go look at the changes. There's a slight difference with how the ampersand operator works. There you go. All right. Logical properties. This is the one for the 10 of you out there that raise your hands. So let's talk about internationalization and right-to-left languages. So let's say I am making a website, right? And I need to be able to do things in English, and I need to be able to do it in like Hebrew or Arabic or some other right-to-left language, right? When we talk about left to right languages, it's languages that you read from the left to the right. So English is a left to right language. When we talk about languages that are right to left, it's languages that you read from the right to the left. Arabic, Hebrew, and some other languages that I can't name off the top of my head do this. When somebody comes to your website and they use insert search provider translate here to translate the page without your permission, it will use your styling that is written with margin left, padding left, border left, margin right, border right, padding right, and apply it to a language that is in the wrong direction. So what that looks like is, if we do a paragraph and it has a margin left of 2 EM, a border left of hot pink, and a padding left of 1 EM, in English it looks fine. In all left to right languages it looks fine. But in right to left, we've now got this rag at the end, right, where that's the end of the line. But we've got this border for no reason, right? What we want is that we want that border actually on the other side. The way that you would do this before is that you'd have to add additional styles to be like, okay, if dir equals RTL, then undo the thing that I did before and do this new thing, right? With logical properties, we don't care about top, bottom, left, right anymore. We only care about the block model, right? The box model, whatever we're calling it in CSS. So basically, it's things that you've already been using, but you don't realize that you're using it. When we do something display block, it suddenly has a height. So we care about block. And we care about something that goes in a line, you would have inline, right? So new properties that you can use that are logical properties follow this naming convention. We have dash block, so you can do margin dash block, and it'll assign the top and the bottom. You can do margin block start, and that'll do the top. You can do margin block end, and it'll do the bottom. You can do inline start, and it'll do beginning. So we can do margin inline start. It'll give you it at the beginning of the line. You do margin inline end, and it'll give you at the end of the line. So the new way that you would write that previous example is margin inline start 2 EM, border inline start, hot pink, padding inline start 1 EM. And what that ends up looking like is this. You get that for free. You don't even have to do anything. It just does it for you. So if somebody comes along and translates your page, all of your styling matches their language. There are quite a few of these. This list is not exhaustive. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do this with, not just margin padding and border, right? There's a whole bunch of things. Anywhere that you use the word left or top or bottom or right, you can do this. I think there are a few that they are still working on actually getting into the browsers, but like generally speaking, there's a version of this now. Good support. It's supported across a lot of the browsers. You should use it. I mean, you get this lovely feature for free. Super exciting, super great. Yay! Did the 10 people in here who have to deal with internationalization know about this, or? I have one head shaking no, so I'm going to take that as all of your answers. All right, so more information. MDN has a great article on logical properties. All of these are going to start with MDN because it's a great resource. Smashing Mag also has a fantastic thing from 2018. 6 years? 7 years? Math is hard. All right, let's talk about the has selector, also known as the parent selector. This is going to usher in a new age of web development. Like the number of things that you can do now with CSS that don't require JavaScript is partially powered by this lovely little thing right here. So let's talk about a common problem. Your designer comes to you and says, all right, when the input is invalid, I don't want the input styled. I want the box containing the input styled. Who's had that problem before? I've had that problem before. It's a pain in the butt, right? Because what do? You have to go, you have to like write some styles, and then you have to add some classes, and then you have to write some JavaScript to listen for event stuff, and then like you're gonna do a whole bunch of things, right? Like you're listening for an input, and then you're checking if it's invalid, and if it's invalid, then you have to add a class to another thing, and like, right? So when you do it, right, it's like, okay, cool, that's an invalid email, maybe. All right, I have to submit. There we go. It's an invalid email. It causes the border to turn red. Oh no, like, right? It's a whole lot of JavaScript to make that happen. That's a pain in the butt. What the has selector is that it allows you to pick things based on the contents of that thing. So for instance, if we do input wrapper has input invalid, what this does is that it looks at the wrapper and it goes, does it have an input inside of it that is in an invalid state? At that point, you have selected not the thing inside of it, you are selecting the wrapper. Because the wrapper is, the has looks at the stuff inside of it, right? And so when we do this in action, what it looks like is we have our Sass file here. We have input wrapper has invalid border color red. There's no JavaScript, this is just Sass. So if I type in Alex, it automatically turns red. No JavaScript involved. Let's talk about another example, which I'm not going to show because I don't have a code pen written for that. Do you want, who here likes being able to switch between, who likes to be able to switch between light theme, dark theme stuff? With has, you can go body has input type checkbox, name, dark mode, checked, and then apply a whole bunch of custom properties to change your theme to the dark mode. The body has a checkbox, so let's apply styles to the body. You now have a magical switch that works with no JavaScript. Support for this is pretty good. It came out last year, I think, and so it's well supported across all of the major browsers. I highly recommend using this. You're gonna start, once you know that you can do this, you're gonna start seeing more places where you can use it. So be excited, this one's great. They said for years it couldn't be done, and then somebody was like, what if we just do it? And they were like, oh, okay. It was a little bit more complicated than that, but that was basically it. For more information, we have MDN, we have Jen Simmons over at WebKit, and we have Brecht wrote a really great list of like practical uses of this. I think a couple of my examples are like described in that, but he has a lot more. All right, let's talk about container queries. Who here has heard of container queries? Great. Who here writes in like a component-based framework like React, Vue, Angular? Yeah. I'm about to make your life so much better. Let's talk about a real-world example. I ran into this example a couple of years ago. I was building a Shopify website. There's a little box on a sidebar. You have a big picture of the item. You have a little box on a sidebar. Client wanted 2 lists, right? Just list of like features, right? So there should be 2 columns. Problem is that when you reduce the size of the screen, it'd do this. The text would suddenly wrap, and they're like, that's ugly. Fix that, right? Media query, number 1. Now it becomes 1 column. Great, so we've done 1 media query. Fantastic, so keep on reducing the size of the screen down. We get to tablet size, and nope. We really need it to be 2 columns, right? Media query number 2, 2 columns. You keep going, you get to your 3rd media query, because it has to go back to 1 column for a phone. All right, so at this point, we're at 3 media queries to be able to make this happen. Container queries don't do things based on the size of the screen. They do things based on the size of the box the thing is in. Huh? Yeah. Okay, so what that looks like is we create a box that has no styling. It's just a box, so that's our wrapper. And we say that this is a container, so container type inline. So we're checking the inline. Remember inline? We just talked about it like 5 minutes ago with logical properties. Inline, so we're checking the inline size. And then the container, we give it a name. We can give it a name, so we're giving it the name of blue box, because it's ultimately what it is that it's the blue box. And then we can style our blue box, and we're going to give it 1 column. And then we're going to do at container blue box, min width 450 pixels. So when it is at minimum 450 pixels, we're going to split it into 2 columns. And so what that looks like is this. This is 2 columns. It's at least 450 pixels. But once I open up the CSS for it, you can see it automatically resizes down to 1 column because I'm using a container query to turn it into 1 column. Ooh, other uses for this. Pagination. You have a pagination component, right? You have it on a page at the bottom, and it goes 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 8, 9, 10, dot, 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 20, 21, 22, right? Left and right arrows. It's really long. You don't want to put that on a phone, so you make a media query so that when you're on a phone, right, you can then have like a smaller list of like left, right, maybe a drop down or something, I don't know. So what happens when you have a screen this size and your designer comes along and goes, here's a paginated list that needs to go in a modal that's this big? Well, it's media query, so it's the size of the, it's going to go out because it's the size of the screen. So now you got to do like an extra class to be able to trigger the styles. Or we can put it in a container query and say, when the size of the box that the pagination is in is below a certain size, do the mobile view. So when you put it in that modal, it's smaller than the size of the container query, and it will then display the mobile view. So now you're not having to write a toggle for this that you're manually having to check. It just does it. Container queries are super powerful and super great. There's actually some extra stuff coming with container queries where you will be able to do a container query based on the value of a custom property. So you can say this container query relates to this custom property, and then you can be like, when this custom property is of value wooble, do these other styles. And so suddenly you have a thing that can trigger that. Great. All right, so support. Good support. Everything's supported. Fantastic. If you want more information, we have MDN and Miriam Suzanne wrote a great question article about it. All right. 4 minutes, here we go. All right, at layer. This is, I got qualms with this one, but we're going to go through it. So when we're talking about CSS, we're talking about specificity, right? In this example, if I want something that has my class on it to use text red and have the text become red, this will not work, right? And so we start an arms battle when we try to do this because somebody's going to come along and be like, well, you know, we should just add an important, right? Don't do that. Stop using important. Unless you're using an older version of Bootstrap, in which case you're already at war, I'm not going to stop you. The other way to fix this, previously, right, the other way to fix this would be, okay, cool, don't use important, just flip the order, right? We do my class, then with text red. Text red wins because it is defined after my class. And then some jerk comes along and changes a selector. Now this will never work, right? Like now you're back into like an arms race of like specificity and like how many class selectors are we using, right? And you're going to start doing some weird stuff. What layers do is that they define a cascade layer. Now, you have been dealing with cascade layers since you started doing development. I'm going to let you sit on that one. Not because I'm thirsty. All right, so cascade layers, you have been dealing with them. If you go to a web page with no style sheet attached to it, and you put an H1 on there, that H1 has style of some sort. It's not a great style, but it exists because there are user agent styles. Those user agent styles live in a cascade layer. They are always going to be less important, less specific than anything in the default layer, right? So somebody in the standards body was like, can we just like let authors define those things? And everybody was like, yeah, actually, yeah, we should do that. That's really easy. We can do that. So they did, and that is what layers are. So layers are a way to define named layers. So we have style and utility. And so what you do is you do at layer, and then you can put in a name. And it's by order of first appearance, right? So, last is going to be more specific than whatever is defined first. So in this case, utility will always override style because that's how we're defining it. And then we use @layer style, and I can do .myWrapper, my class, and then @layer utility textRed. TextRed will always win in this case, right? Fantastic. We have solved the problem, and we are not using important, and it will never be a problem. It also works if you do it right, if you flip the thing. Because we've already defined style and utility at the top, this also does the same thing. It doesn't care what order you do it after you define it the first time. What's great about this is if you're using a framework, you can make all of your styles be more important than the framework that you're bringing in. Ooh, super handy. All right, support. Support is good. This has been around for a couple of years at this point. You can pretty much use it. Here's the thing. Remember I said don't use important? Layers make this worse. I got 2 bones to pick with layers. One of them is if the order of specificity for important is reversed of what the layer order is. So if I do styles utility, right, and then I make something important in styles, that will override utility, even if utility also has the thing as important. Yeah. The other problem is that everything in a layer is less specific than the default layer. So if you're using a third-party JavaScript thing that just suddenly injects some CSS into the page, your styles will always lose. Now the good news is, this happened a month ago. Thank you. This happened a month ago. The CSS working group has figured out what the syntax is so that you can define a layer that is more specific than the default layer. So that will stop being a problem. Yeah, anyway, so they've solved one of my problems. That does not exist in a browser quite yet, but it's going to. For more information about that, we have MDN, we have Miriam Suzanne. I would like to say a big thank you to John Neal, who helped me with that slide at the beginning that has all 530 CSS features scrolling by. And if you would like more information, once again, QR code, all the code pens are there, and feel free to reach out to me on any of my socials. And thank you very much for coming to my talk.